Mercedes didn't just win the Japanese Grand Prix. They exposed something the FIA could no longer ignore. Because after Suzuka, the data didn't just show dominance. It showed a pattern. A car that gains more energy every lap, deploys more than anyone else, and still finishes over 13 seconds ahead without even pushing. That is not normal performance. That is control at a level Formula One hasn't seen in years. 3 races, 3 wins, 133 points already secured. And now, the FIA has confirmed what every team in the paddock was starting to suspect. Mercedes isn't just faster. They've solved something the others haven't. And when one team solves the system, the sport starts asking questions. Because this is the part nobody can ignore anymore. If this advantage is real, this championship might already be decided. Unless something changes. Subscribe now, because what the FIA confirmed is only the beginning. Right after the Japanese Grand Prix ended, the celebration was immediate. Mercedes on top again. Another win. Another perfect result on paper. But behind the scenes, the real story had already begun. Because within hours of the race finishing, teams weren't talking about the winner. They were talking about the numbers. And more importantly, what those numbers confirmed. Because when engineers compared the full race data from Suzuka, they didn't find a small advantage. They found something consistent, repeatable, and that is what changes everything. Lap after lap, Mercedes wasn't just faster. They were operating with a level of efficiency no one else could match. Not in one sector. Not in one moment. Across the entire race. Now this is where things start to get serious. Because in Formula One, consistency is what reveals the truth. Anyone can have one fast lap. Anyone can get strategy right once. But sustaining performance without loss, that's where the real questions begin. And Suzuka provided exactly that. Because if you look at the second stint, after the safety car, everything becomes clear. Antonelli doesn't just take the lead. He controls the race completely. Within just a few laps, the gap opens. 1 second, 2 seconds, then more. And from that point on, no one gets close again. By the end, the advantage is over 13 seconds. Now think about that carefully. In modern Formula One, a gap like that doesn't happen unless something is fundamentally different. And when the FIA reviewed this exact phase of the race, they didn't just see speed. They saw confirmation. Because the data aligned perfectly with what teams had been suspecting since the first race. Mercedes has eliminated the usual limitations. Energy usage, optimized. Tire degradation, minimized. Top speed, maximized. All at the same time. That is not a coincidence. That is a system working exactly as designed. And this is the key point. The FIA didn't confirm wrongdoing. They confirmed the pattern. And once a pattern is confirmed, the next step is inevitable. Deeper analysis. Closer monitoring. And eventually, intervention, if necessary. But here's where the story becomes even more intense. Because while all of this is happening externally, inside Mercedes, something else is starting to shift. Because dominance like this doesn't just create pressure from rivals. It creates pressure from within. And after Japan, that internal balance is no longer the same. And this is where the situation inside Mercedes begins to fracture. Not publicly. Not in a way you can see on camera. But in the kind of way that decides championships long before the final race. Because after Japan, there is no longer any doubt about one thing. Antonelli is now the reference. The driver with the momentum. The driver extracting everything from the car. And most importantly, the driver leading the championship. At just 19 years old. Now think about what that does inside a team like Mercedes. Because Formula One teams don't operate on emotion. They operate on data. And the data from Suzuka was very clear. Antonelli wasn't just winning. He was faster. Even before the safety car, even stuck behind Russell, he was gaining almost half a second per lap. That kind of gap, inside the same team, is impossible to ignore. And this is where things start to change. Subtly, strategically. Because when a team identifies a driver who can maximize a dominant car, everything begins to shift in that direction. Not openly, but in moments that matter. Strategy calls, pit decisions, race priorities. And Suzuka gave us the first clear example. The safety car. That single moment divided the race. Antonelli pits. Fresh tires. Clean air. Full control. Russell stays out. Track position, but no advantage. And from that point on, the outcome is sealed. Now here's the part that creates tension. Because decisions like that are never random. They are based on trust. Trust in who can deliver the result. And after Japan, that trust is starting to lean in one direction. Now imagine being Russell. You know the car can win. You felt it all weekend. But one setup decision, one strategic moment, and suddenly, you're no longer in control of your own race. That frustration doesn't disappear. It stays. And when it combines with something else, it becomes dangerous. Because while Russell is dealing with internal pressure, there is external pressure building at the same time. The FIA watching, rivals questioning, data being analyzed race after race. And now, confirmation that Mercedes is operating differently. So inside the team, two forces are colliding: performance pressure and regulatory attention. And that combination is exactly what has broken dominant teams in the past. Because when everything is perfect, the smallest imbalance becomes a problem. A missed setup, a strategy call, a shift in trust, and suddenly, the stability disappears. Right now, Mercedes still looks unstoppable. 3 races, 3 wins, a championship lead already forming. But underneath that dominance, there is something growing, quietly, relentlessly. Because if the FIA continues to look deeper, and if the internal balance continues to shift, this season won't just be about how fast Mercedes is. It will be about how long they can hold everything together. And the moment that balance breaks, everything changes. And this is where everything finally connects. Because up to this point, you've seen the dominance. You've seen the data. You've seen the internal tension starting to build. But what the FIA confirmed after Japan points to something much deeper than just performance. It points to how Mercedes is winning. Because when investigators and engineers aligned all the information, lap times, energy usage, race pace, they all led to the same conclusion. Mercedes hasn't just improved one area. They've optimized everything at once. And that is the real breakthrough. Because if you look closely at the numbers, the W17 is not just faster in clean air. It's faster in traffic. Not just strong at the beginning of a stint, but at the end as well. And that breaks one of the fundamental rules of Formula One. Performance always drops. Grip always fades. Energy always becomes harder to manage. But in Japan, Mercedes showed the opposite. Their performance stayed stable, lap after lap. And that's exactly what the FIA focused on. Because stability at that level is not just an advantage. It's control over variables that are supposed to limit you. Now here's where the story reaches its most important point. Because when the FIA confirms a pattern like this, they don't just monitor it. They prepare for what comes next. And what comes next in Formula One is almost always the same. A clarification. A technical directive. A small change in interpretation that suddenly changes everything. Not overnight, but fast enough to shift a championship. And this is why teams like Red Bull and Ferrari are watching so closely. Because right now, they cannot match Mercedes on track. The gap is too big. More than a second per lap in some conditions. That is not something you fix with upgrades. That is something you hope gets regulated. And this is the hidden battle no one talks about. While fans watch the races, teams are already preparing for the moment the rules shift. Because if Mercedes is forced to adjust even one part of the system, the entire balance could collapse. Energy advantage gone. Tire life reduced. Consistency broken. And suddenly, they become vulnerable. But until that moment arrives, Mercedes remains in control. Completely. A car that does everything better. A driver leading the championship at 19. And a team that looks unstoppable from the outside. But inside, they know something is coming. Because in Formula One, when the FIA confirms what everyone suspected, that is never the end of the story. That is the beginning of the turning point. And this is where the story stops being about Mercedes and starts being about the entire sport. Because when one team reaches this level, Formula One doesn't just watch. It reacts. Slowly at first. Quiet conversations. Private meetings. Engineers presenting data behind closed doors. But after Japan, that phase is already over. Because now, everyone knows. Mercedes has built something the others cannot match. Not yet. And that changes how the rest of the season will be fought. Because from this point forward, teams are no longer just developing their cars. They are targeting Mercedes directly. Every weakness. Every possible interpretation of the rules. Every detail that could be questioned. And this is where the pressure multiplies. Because it's no longer just one rival. It's all of them. Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren. All looking at the same thing. All trying to find the same answer. Where is the limit? And has Mercedes already crossed it? Or are they simply operating right on the edge? That question alone is enough to change everything. Because once that doubt exists, every race becomes more than just points. It becomes evidence. Every lap, every stint, every data set, all being analyzed, compared, challenged. And here's where it becomes even more intense. Because while the FIA continues to monitor, they don't need a massive violation to act. Sometimes, all it takes is a clarification, a small adjustment in how a rule is interpreted, and suddenly, an entire advantage disappears. We've seen it before. Dominant cars becoming ordinary almost overnight, not because they slowed down naturally, but because the rules caught up. And now, Mercedes is standing right at that edge, still dominant, still untouchable on track, but surrounded by attention, surrounded by questions, and most importantly, surrounded by expectation. Because if nothing changes, this championship is already slipping away from everyone else. 3 races, 3 wins, a gap that continues to grow. That is not sustainable for competition. And Formula One always protects competition. So the real story now is not what Mercedes has done. That's already clear. The real story is what happens next. Does the FIA step in? Do rivals find a way to close the gap? Or does Mercedes continue, untouched, unchallenged, on their way to one of the most dominant seasons in history? Because one thing is certain after Japan. What everyone suspected has now been confirmed. And once something is confirmed in Formula One, it never stays quiet for long.